Good evening, everyone. Hope I'm audible. Sonia ma'am, if you can give me a check whether I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, very good evening once again, everyone. I, Shalini Mishra, welcome you all on behalf of Estrand Group. And today, our speaker for the day, Ms. Sonia Singh, ma'am, is here with us. She has joined, and she'll be enlightening us about, the project-based approach to teaching science. So we'll be talking in detail about this in today's session. Talking about ma'am's profile. So Ms. Sonia Singh is a trained instructional designer and a content writer. She's a science graduate from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and is an MA in education. She has undergone various IB and Cambridge workshops. She has built her repertoire of teaching, learning practices. Ms. Singh is a passionate educationist with a rich experience in educational pedagogy and comes with over 15 years of classroom experience, teacher training, and curriculum development. So, with such a huge experience, ma'am is here with us today, and she'll be talking in detail about the project-based approach of teaching science. And there are certain housekeeping rules that we all will keep in mind while attending the session. So I'll just keep you all on mute in order to, in order to keep the session smooth going. And if you all can have a pen and paper just to note down the important information, that will be great. We generally keep the chat box disabled, but this time we'll keep it enabled throughout the session so that you can keep interacting with ma'am, and there will be certain question and answers each, or there will be certain interactions she'll be having with you all. So we'll keep the chat box enabled for you. You can use that to quickly answer whatever questions or quizzes have been asked from you. For e-certificates, you need to fill out a feedback form. And once you fill the feedback form, you'll receive your e-certificates on your email. After the session, we'll send you a feedback form on your registered email ID. So you must all have registered through your email IDs, and you'll get the feedback form on the same email IDs. Even the e-certificates will be sent to you on your registered email ID. So now from here, handing over to Sonia ma'am. Ma'am, you there?
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for kind words. Yeah. And thank you, participants, for joining in today. And good evening, good morning, or good afternoon from whichever part of the world that you are in. I am here in Delhi with, for a change, fantastic weather here. So I guess all is right because the rains are in and we have good weather here. Keeping that on a positive note, I think I'll just begin the session. Just allow me 10 seconds. I'll just share my screen. Yeah, Shalini, if you can just give me a heads up. It's
yes, ma'am, absolutely visible. Your screen is visible.
Perfect. So what we're going to be talking about today is going to be a project-based learning approach specifically for science. Nevertheless, project-based is being used and can be used for your student learning to be effective in any of the subjects. So in case if there is any teacher or an educator who's joined who does not teach science, please don't feel that it's not for you. It is for you because it can still be relevant and used into your classrooms directly. So very quick, just to get to know your comfort zone with project-based learning. So for PBL, where would you rate yourself as? What do you think, how comfortable are you while doing PBL? Rate yourself in the chat box, write out the number from 1 to 5, with 1 being completely beginner and 5 being well experienced. So if you can very quickly just put in that particular number, it will give me an idea of where you are. Okay, I think great. What I noticed was most of the people have typed out the number 3. There were a few 1s and there were some 4s as well. So which means it's going to be a varied group, very much like our own classroom as we come across with children from different levels. I will try and keep this session suitable for every one of you. I'll try and give examples which can actually help each one of you. So the day today in this 1 hour, what we're going to cover is very, very simple. The agenda will be just to talk about the what, why, and the how of project-based learning. So let's begin with what is project-based learning? So what, according to you, do you think is project-based learning? So maybe just that one little phrase or a particular word that comes to your mind when you think of project-based learning, if you can quickly type out in the chat box. Okay, great. So some of the answers that I'm getting are hands-on, learning by doing, creative learning, deductive learning, problem-based learning, instructional approach, do and learn. So broadly, I think everyone has an idea of what project-based learning is. Just what we will kind of do is we'll try and take that one step ahead of from the knowledge that we already have and go a little ahead. So project-based learning is a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging all word for project-based learning, and which is real world. So they have to actively be engaged in the real world projects that we give them. So that is what makes our project-based learning very, very authentic. This is something very important to remember. So if all of us know what project-based learning is, and all of us have been doing projects ever since, I think even when we were in school, we did projects, then what is not project-based learning? Where is it that we generally go wrong? Look at some non-examples. These are not project-based learning, but these are some projects which I think all of us, knowingly or unknowingly, have done it in our classes. Or even we, as when we were students, we've also gone through this. I've just picked up a few popular ones. I'm sure there are way more. If you look at the science fair that generally comes up, where you will have students performing different experiments, they will have a hypothesis and they will collect data, and then they will finally share their findings with the audience who comes for that project. This is not project-based learning. You have an art exhibition where people put up their artwork on any of the themes or the artist that they want to, and they showcase that collection. This is not project-based learning. If there are some language or literature teachers here, in case if you do a book report where you read out a particular book, you summarize the plot, you analyze the characters, and finally you write out with your personal reflections. This is not project-based learning. A lot of times we ask our students to gather information, learn about something, and finally create a poster of their learnings and present it. At the end, this is once again not your PBL. And of course, the most common one that we end up doing is that there is a particular concept or a topic which is covered in the class, and finally towards the end, a model is made. For the very young ones, I still remember me as a primary school student or remembering to make these dioramas in school boxes. I'm sure each one of you will also remember those. Those are not project-based learning. Just trying to understand then what is the difference between the two so that we can ensure that in our classrooms, what we do is authentic PBL. So it's the basic difference. You know, your PBL or your project-based learning is actually the main course of your food that you have. Whereas when you do a project, what we call as popularly doing a project is actually your dessert that you have in the end. A lot of times, the projects which are done in school are actually a showcase of the learning. The learning has already taken place, either by the teacher actually teaching or a student's already researching or in any particular way. That has already been done. And then a project comes in. That is actually just presenting the dessert of your main course, and it is not project-based learning. So essentially, your project-based learning has to be something through which your students learn. So as the name suggests, that the learning happens based on that project. Whereas a lot of times in the classroom, what is being done is doing a project. The learning has already been completed and then a project is being done. And the basic differences that end up is that one is being done at the end of the unit or end of a topic, whereas the other one is done through that particular unit or the topic. The learning happens through it. At the end, when you do a project, usually a teacher tells you what is the expectation and what has to be done. Whereas when you do through the unit, it is completely by the student's inquiry, because all that you are telling them to do is a certain question, which is based on real life, and they have to showcase on their own their learning. So various different products would come out. When you do a project, what you are looking forward to is the final product. Whereas project-based learning may have a product, sure, but the focus would also be on the process that the child has taken to actually learn that particular concept. A lot of times the project ends up being one of the most aesthetically beautiful looking piece and does not really showcase the standards that have been completed of the curriculum or the skills that have been developed. Whereas your PBL is always rightly aligned to the standards and the skills that you are trying to do. A project could be done alone. PBL, it is always recommended, should be in collaboration. It builds up very strongly on your collaboration skills. So it is always a group of students with the guidance of the teacher, of course, that can be done. The most important aspect that comes in is that your PBL has to have a real world context and application. And automatically, when it has a real world context and application, the showcasing of that particular PBL is way beyond your classroom showcase. It is an application into the real life. And it doesn't get limited to just one day in the class, that project being shown. So that is the difference that comes up. So a lot of times we need to be very, very sure of that when we use the word that we are doing PBL, are we authentically really doing PBL, or are we just serving the dessert in it? Having gone through that, what really is PBL, why should we really be doing that? What is the impact that it has on students? Obviously, the first thing I think that it'll go is that if you have your students actively engaged in it, they are the ones who are deciding the process. They are the ones who are deciding on what they want to present. They are extremely engaged. It's not just for the sake of learning. It is not for the sake of an assessment. It is not for the sake of just the grades. They want to do it because they want to find out the answer. And that is why they want to do it. Now, with that will and motivation to learn, the learning that happens through PBL is way deeper than it would have for any other kind of learning. And if your learning is deeper, obviously it will be retained a little more also. So something that, we felt that the moment that topic is over, the children tend to forget what they had learned. I think that problem stops. A PBL project will automatically expose your children to adults, to maybe also expose them to the different career options which are going to be there. Because when you reach out to the real world, when you try and make it more relevant to the community, you learn way beyond just your classroom. You learn way beyond just that science topic of yours, just physics, chemistry, bio. You go way beyond that. A lot of times, I, for one, at least, I remember me as a student when I was studying and I was learning on the human body systems. And I was very, very clear that I don't want to be a doctor. And every time that I used to be learning about all the human body systems and all those biological names, my question would always come, why am I doing this? But I don't want to be a doctor. So why do I really need to do this? This particular answer, if I felt years ago, I'm sure the students feel it even more. So when they do real world application projects, I think that major transformation happens in students. They understand the sense of why they need to do it. And in case they are prepared, they understand the need for it, you will find that they take the onus of their whole learning. So the idea of running behind your students and telling them, hey, this concept is not done by you, you still need to do it, I think will stop all of that. Your children will start taking up the onus of their own learning, and you will find that eventually what is really required, the results would start coming out better. And besides that, they would grow up into individuals which would be more of global citizens. Through all of this, what you will find is that since they work collaboratively, besides just the collaborative skill that comes up, a lot of other skills start getting developed. When you work in a group, you tend to be very mindful of how you speak, what you speak, how do you conduct yourself. So even basic skills like your social skills also would start getting developed. Not to mention that, of course, your research skills, your writing skills, your other communication skills, your self-management skills, all of those would automatically be getting developed. So what now even our own NEP talks about, and what the other international curriculums also talk about, that we need to be more skill-based and not content-based. I think through a project, it'll just flow in naturally. So for teachers who face that problem of how much can we do in the limited time that we have? The curriculum is so vast. I'll never be able to complete that. You will find that if you start moving on to PBL, a lot of things will naturally flow into it. You really don't need to spend that kind of extra time or planning out that, okay, how am I going to develop the skills for my students? It will happen. Then, of course, you share a beautiful bond, I think, with your students. And that is what makes your teaching career, I think, the most rewarding. So you're very closely engaged with your students. And when you're very closely engaged with your students, I think you get to know each and every pulse of your particular child. You get to know what makes them tick. You get to know what is the help that they require. And that really helps. And finally, of course, is their creativity and the technology. We cannot deny the fact that the rate at which the world is moving, we will need to make our students technologically ready for the world. We cannot deny the fact that AI is there for staying and maybe even becoming better. So you need to make your children savvy with that. We need to ensure that it becomes the right decisions when technology are concerned, they do that. So in case if you give them a more productive work with technology, all the doubts that arise, oh, my children will be playing games, they would be on the wrong sites, I think all of that will disappear because they'll have things to do. They've taken the onus of their own learning. So use technology because it is going to happen. And I think the best way is through your project-based learning. So just before I move on to the how now, of course, we've done the what and we've done the why. I'll just give you 2 minutes in case if there are any specific questions at this particular time, if you want me to deal with, on what is PBL and why should we do PBL. So if you have any particular question, you can very quickly type out in the chat box and I'll cover that up. Yeah, I think Tahira has mentioned that PBL is learning through hands-on and doing activities. So it is, I would say that, but every activity is not project-based. So that is the difference that we need to. So because in case if you know what the outcome is going to be, there is actually no learning which is happening. So in case when you do something like float and sink, and you've already given them certain objects and you tell them, okay, find out which is the one which is floating and which is the one which is sinking, you've really given away the answer. You already told them that there is something that will float and there is something that will sink. And there is really no major learning that is coming out of it. And there is no real world application that comes out of it. Maybe if you frame the whole project in such a way that, you are to transport some material from here to there, but there is a certain lake there, what kind of a boat would you make? So you will need to make those activities or the hands-on experiments that you talk about more real world applied. So this is one of the biggest confusion that arises, that we loosely use the term that, okay, any activity that we do is project-based. It is not really project-based. There is a slight difference. Of course, I do have a session tomorrow on inquiry-based, but there is a question that came in that it is very similar to Kath Murdoch's inquiry cycle. I would not say that it is not, but then two of them have a basic difference. The difference is in project-based learning, you will have a product that comes out. In an inquiry-based learning, you could end your learning with still a question. There is necessarily no product that comes in an inquiry-based learning. Of course, we will take up inquiry-based learning way more in detail tomorrow, but there is a difference. So these are these subtle differences which we need to understand and try and use them effectively and authentically as and when required. Somebody also asked, is it time consuming? Well, I know that's the biggest worry that we educators have. I would say that it's not really as time consuming as we expect it to be, because in case you plan it really well, what it really needs is your planning before you start a project. The moment you have your planning in place and you plan it out, this is how you expect it to go, I don't think you will find that it is very time consuming, because every topic you always have a certain number of teaching hours that you've decided. So it can get covered. And the moment we do how we do this and how we plan, you will find that it gets answered. So the question on finding out why certain things float and why certain things sink is PBL. If I just reframe that question and connect it to the real world, it will become project-based. We will also do this right now as to how are we actually going to have those real world type of questions. We'll just cover those. So I think let's move on to how of project-based learning. So these are the basic steps that we look into project-based learning. Very, very basic, no big deal. I'm sure for each of your lessons, which are not even project-based learning, this is how you would go about. But if you plan it really well, the first step that you need to think of is that you need to start with an essential question. So that first question for your project is very, very important. Your project must have a question. That what is it that they are trying to do through that project. It is not really just make a project on habitats, just make a project on digestive system. These are not really your project-based learning. Have that essential question, which is going to be connected to the real world. How you frame that correct question is also the steps that we will be covering right now. Once you have that essential question, the second thing is you're going to design out a plan for the project. So your planning of the project when you have and when you create the schedule, all curriculums now talk of an integrated approach. They talk from the fact that no subject should be taught in its own self alone. Basically being because when a child moves out in real life, he doesn't see, oh, this is a physics concept that I need to solve. Oh, this is a biological concept. He just sees, okay, fine, this is what I've learned and I need to apply it. He doesn't remember the subjects. So then in school, also we need not throw him those subjects. So try and pick up a concept and connect it and integrate it with all of them. When you, all of them or as many as you can. The moment you have this integration which is happening and you've created a schedule, the question for time consuming will get sorted, because you will find the other teachers also cover their curriculum through that particular one project. So it will become way easier for everyone. Through the process, like I spoke, it's not just the product, it is also the process. Through the process, you as a teacher, you as their facilitator, must keep monitoring what your students are doing and seeing how well are they progressing. It is not really necessary that all the students will go very, very smoothly. They might just get stuck at a certain point. And there is nothing wrong for your teacher to step in at that particular time and support the particular group. You should assess the outcome. The outcomes are assessed. Of course, how do you do these assessments is also something that we'll cover. And finally, you evaluate the experience. So when I say evaluate the experience, besides your rubrics and your gradings and everything, the most important aspect that also comes in that you reflect back. You as an educator reflect back on the project and the essential question that you had given. And I think the students also need to reflect back. It can be something as simple as I had fun doing this, or something as simple as, oh, I hated this project, which is okay. Just be open to accepting that feedback also from your student. So the steps are very, very simple, but have these steps in mind. Don't just take them for granted, because you will end up then getting lost in the time schedule that you have. So if essential question is the main thing, how do you really frame a question? First, of course, the question needs to be open-ended. It should never be a question which has one right or wrong answer, because if it has one right or wrong answer, the child might as well just go on Google, search for the answer. Now, in fact, not even Google, may just go on ChatGPT, find out the answer and learn it up. There is no point in having a project-based learning. It has to be something which is open-ended, because just to share with you that open-ended questions, if any one of you has even tried on ChatGPT, the ChatGPT is unable to answer. It says I'm an artificial intelligence robot, and I really can't think on different perspectives. So that is something that we can work on. So they need to be open-ended questions. They need to be based on your Bloom's taxonomy. Try and keep them towards the higher levels, because your basic listing and the definitions and everything are again something which are the right and the wrong. There is a right answer and there is a wrong answer. So those are something which the child can just read up from the book or from the internet. So try and keep them on the upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy. There has to be an action taker. There has to be somebody trying to say that who are the participants in this project? Whom are you expecting should participate? Is it your whole class? Is it in group? Is it just you and the teacher who's going to be doing it? You are expecting that child to go out and do it at their home community, but who are the people who are going to be participating in this particular project? So mention out. And usually I know in schools, it is the class or a particular group that takes this. Finally, what is the action? So what is it that you are expecting is going to be coming out of it? What is that final product that will come out? If it is a service, what kind of service is actually going to happen? So there has to be like what the outcome you're expecting. Whom will that product actually be for? Are we going to go beyond our classroom? Is it going to be relevant to somebody? What is the impact that it is going to have? So is it relevant to the community today? Is it relevant to just your household people? Is it relevant to your school community, to the city that you live in, to maybe the people who come to the park for a walk? But you need to make it relevant and have an impact on certain people or the world. Once you have a question like that, then your PBL you will find becomes very, very easy, because that question actually tells your students of what to do and how to do it. So it will become way easier. If you have a very, very straightforward question, I think the children will find the answer in 2 minutes. They are extremely smart and it is over with. So take a lot of time to frame that essential questions. So if you remember, we had begun with what is not project-based learning. So the example there, the first one that I spoke about, was your science fair project. So which was that you conduct experiments and you have your hypothesis before that, and then you perform those, gather the data, and finally share them, which I said was not PBL. So if that was not PBL, that means it didn't have a sensible or the right essential question. What kind of question do you think it should have? Can you rephrase it, pick up any particular issue that is around there for your particular grade? So maybe you could cover up for pollution, maybe you could cover up for any other thing that you want, and rephrase and make an essential question for your project-based learning, which you would like your students to work on that particular project. Can you just type that out to the chat box? Use all the pointers that we just discussed. Just for your ease, I will show you those pointers once again. If you can frame the question now and put that in the chat box. There's a question, who should decide about the participant of the project? That's a choice between the teacher and the students. Sometimes the teacher makes the groups purely because you want to work on certain, differently abled students, or you want to do differentiation in your class, or sometimes you just leave it open to your students. You see their comfort zone and you tell them to pick up. So it is purely their choice.
Ma'am, can you once again repeat the question? There is a
Question.
Yeah.
Question is something very simple. All that I'm saying is that instead of doing a science fair project, which is just where people do different experiments. I know in schools, usually on that science day is when every group does an experiment. They will make those, I know for that elephant toothpaste, which is the most common. For the little ones is that volcano that they make. So, instead of doing something like that and presenting, what is the kind of question that you would like to give your students to be working on?
We have some answers in chat box, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, that's a nice one, Tina, what you've come up with. That's a great one. Because through this, the children will find out about what actually can be categorized as waste, what are actually the sustainable practices. So first, the term sustainable, depending on what age group you're talking about. If they are older children, obviously they would already know this, but then they would go that one step ahead. How can I actually develop different innovative ideas? What can I do with this particular waste? And this is something which is need of the hour. It is absolutely related to the real world. So when you have a question like compare the air quality index of your city with that of the metropolitan city, it really doesn't have an impact. It is connected to the real world. It does talk about, okay, air pollution. What is the impact that you are? How is it going to actually help the community? How is it relevant? Why is he trying to find out this comparison? I mean, a child will turn around and say that I'm not living there. Like, I'll give you a very simple example. There was this teacher of mine, and she was teaching grade 2 students, and she was talking about, how our actions are actually melting the glaciers. And she showed that picture of that famous, penguin sitting on that melted glacier. And there was a child who actually turned around and said, I'm sitting here in Delhi. How does my action here affect the glacier so far off? So that why has to have an answer. And that answer doesn't need to be the one that teacher gives. It has to come through the project-based learning. So when you say compare, you have to maybe talk about that, why is it happening like this? What is the solution that metros can come up with? So great. I see most of you have started connecting it to real world. Fantastic. I think what is getting missed out in most of the questions is, I'll just go back to the previous slide. okay, is your action and the impact, right? You are still expecting them to just learn that particular content. You're expecting that content is going to come out. Okay, so why is the idli batter rising? Why is all of that happening? But that's okay. How will it help? Why? The child will turn around and say, I don't want to be a cook. So why will it help? So those are the things. So don't keep your questions so limited to a very small topic. Try and widen it out. Okay, so maybe you could talk purely from the fact of fermentation. And you can say that, how would you talk about fermentation and how is it going to be useful in your life? So don't keep it just to that one particular thing, right? So make it broader. That's where your project will eventually come out. They should not just be doing on idli because you've already given that to them, that this happens. They should be the ones who should be able to find out that, when you do this, it ferments. This is called fermentation. There are a lot of other things, even in our body. Where does it come in? So what is the use of it? So that impact is extremely important to bring out. Yes, so some of them have started having that impact also. Great. So try and have a project that will cover up most of your particular topic or that chapter that you are wanting to. If you're working on pollution, try and have a project and that essential question, which should cover up everything that you want your child to learn about pollution, and not just ways to control pollution or, what is pollution. Because in that much of time, like you said, that you want to save your time also. So you should be able to frame one question which covers up everything, which should be able to cover up, okay, the types of pollution, why is the pollution increasing? What is it that we need to do? What is the further problems that can come up because of pollution? It should cover up everything. So try and frame your projects accordingly for that, because then your children will work over days for that particular project and you will find that your whole lesson gets over. So this is something I think which already somebody had mentioned, that how can you students mitigate the effect of plastic waste in our community? And let them actually do it. Let them actually bring out that action in the community. They actually go around doing it. Yeah, does this make sense? Does it get a little clearer? Can I just have a yes or a no? Okay, great. So let's see some others. So these are just some thoughts that I thought of. Of course, the same topic can also be changed. So the other non-PBL topics which I had shown there, which were the art exhibition, the book report, the poster making, this is what we could change. Also, in this case, I had noticed that the model building was also something which a person had framed the question in the chat, I think, the innovative solutions. Here it is talking about accessibility for people, because in today's time, how we need to make everything accessible, but you could talk about anything for that particular matter. So just doing a book report, just reading up that particular story and writing about the characters is not really PBL, right? So it could be a biography, which is of course real world connected, but then it doesn't really help, right? So it has to cover up that why aspect and be relevant to the world today. So once you have your essential question in place, then comes your planning. Planning is very, very simple. Think of, for your subjects, just the subject teachers think of a meeting, because you're going to be covering up your whole chapter, which is going to last at least 2 weeks for you. Just before those 2 weeks, sit down together with the other teachers. Think of all the academic standards that you're going to be covering. I'm sure you have all your learning objectives assigned out, which are the ones which you're going to be covering in this particular project. You write them out for this particular subject. Think of the project accordingly and start working on this. Make sure that it is authentic. It is going to have a community connection. It is going to engage your students. They must go out, meet people, interact, and all of that. And most important, please decide the number of days, because projects are something which can go on and on and on. Children will never end that particular project, because once they fall in love with it, they will not want to finish. So you will have to be in charge of that and say, fine, I'm giving you 5 days, and in 5 days it gets over, and then we talk about it and we have a showcasing. Maybe we will go out to our parent community and show it to them. So anything like this that you want. So just an example, a little sample for your pre-planning process. If I talk about investigating habitats and animal adaptation, if that is what my topic is all about, and I'm talking about how do animals adapt to their habitats for survival. You could, these are just simple thoughts that came into my mind, but of course you can talk in any particular way. You can pick up the learning objectives that you wanted. So maybe the science will talk about all your habitat exploration, the different habitats, the adaptations. It will talk about all of that. They could be researching to find out about different habitats in their own community, in that particular area that they stay. They could go about finding out how this is changing. How are, basically the animals adapting towards it? What are the changes which have come in? And the moment that adaptation aspect is coming in, it's a great idea for you to get your art teacher involved in it. And she can maybe start talking about how camouflaging happens, all of that aspect. So her art curriculum also starts getting done, and your science automatically gets a boost for it, because everyone does not like science. Every child will not like science. You could have certain students who love art. So they are the ones who will excel in this particular field, because they are able to camouflage and show that effect so well. You could have a little bit of your maths coming in, where it is talking about different data. So all your data handling, the different charts and the bar graphs, the line graphs, how they change, the difference between the bar graph and the line graph. Your math teacher can pick it up all from there, and all of that can start getting covered. All that you need to do is just have that pre-planning process in particular place. Then for your language teachers, which could be English, Hindi, or any other foreign language that you're talking about, any of them, they need to make sure that through this, they are developing the communication skills. If there is any writing which has to come up, are they doing scientific writing? Is it going to be instructional writing? Is it going to be descriptive writing? Is it going to be narrative writing? And they pick up and they start doing that. Because a child who's not very expressive in writing, now just in case if you were wanting descriptive writing, but a child does not have that kind of vocabulary to be able to express, at least because on the same topic, the child has already learned about habitats and adaptation. He already has that vocabulary, the scientific vocabulary, which means he should be able to write also in that. So he has a solid topic to write on, and doesn't sit down wondering, okay, what do I write? I can't think of a fiction story. I don't have that imagination. So you're all making it much easier. And that's exactly what life is, that you need to have these things connected together. And that's it. The moment you have your pre-planning process in place, your project is thrown out, and that's it. You continue with it. Involve technology. That is today's generation. You tell them to pick up a paper pencil and write, they will hate it. But the same thing you tell them that you can use Google Docs or you can use Microsoft Word, they'll be ready. You tell them to stand up and present, they want PPTs, they want Prezis, they want Google Slides. You tell them to draw out a poster, they don't want to do that. They want Canva, they want Adobe. So they want all of those things. You tell them to collaborate together, they don't want to meet like that because parents will not allow them to be outside. So they are very happy sitting at home. They are on Padlet, they are on Jamboard, and they can do all of these things. So give it to them, make it relevant for them. Give them that time where they use all this technology usefully. So, but explain to them, talk to them about how certain apps you can use for organization, certain can be for collaboration, and certain can be for presentation. So you can have all of these things being done, and you can involve them. Now the last part that we come in. If all of this is happening and the children are just doing everything on their own, where are the assessments? How do I assess? How do I eventually, I'm answerable to the parent that what is it their kids have learned. So how do I do that? Nowhere does PBL say that you cannot assess the content knowledge. It does not say that. In PBL, regularly from time to time, if you want, you can have quizzes. You can expect them to have certain reports. You can assess their demonstrations or the presentations that you are doing. You can talk about when they are collecting their data through surveys, what is the kind of questionnaire that they are making. You can assess all of those. So have quizzes, have all of these. It is just what is being said is, instead of having that final exam, have them through and through. At every stage, you need to have. And it doesn't need to be like an announced assessment. Just today, you find that group of students were today sitting out and maybe just planning, okay, today we are going to do a Google research. Tomorrow, maybe we will go and meet certain environmentalists and get the answers. Just planning this is an assessment. You should be able to see that here is a group which is very good at planning. They've taken their steps really well. So that is the first assessment that you've already done. And the moment they collect that data, you just read through the data that they are doing. That's your second assessment that you've done. And through all of these assessments, make sure that you keep giving them feedback. I know we use the term feedback just because it comes very easily, but try and make that feedback more feed forward. Instead of telling them, hey, this is not right. Do you think you want to repeat it? The children have already done to the best of their knowledge. So just telling them to repeat it doesn't make sense. What you need to tell them is what next? What is it that they have missed? What should they do to make it better? A lot of times for corrections, we just write redo. The child doesn't even know what is he supposed to redo. He's done it already to the best of his knowledge. So tell the children that. So make it more feed forward and on a continuous process. Don't wait till the last presentation and turn around and say, hey, this is not right. Because you've not guided the child. So remember, you're a facilitator. You need to do this continuously. Have regular check-ins with your groups. So maybe decide that, okay, every alternate day, I'm going to sit with one particular group and try and understand what is it that they are working and what is their plan ahead. So have these regular check-in. Encourage each child to have his own goal sheet. What is the child expecting to complete by the end of that particular project? And the children should be doing their own self-assessment. On that goal sheet, they should be rating themselves. I've reached till here. This is what I need to do. Next step is going to be this. So a lot of your feed forward will be taken in, absorbed, and the children will move ahead. That's where we can say that each child has moved ahead of that start line and is moving closer to the finish line. They may not all reach the finish line, but at least they have moved forward. So start doing that. The children need to know what are they being assessed at. Share the rubrics or the checklist or whatever criteria. Share it with them. They need to know. If you are correcting their spelling mistakes in that writing, please tell them that I know it is science, but I'm going to still check your spellings. So the child needs to know. So tell your children that this is what you are doing. Make your criteria extremely clear. And have your quizzes, because I know eventually at the end of the day, to the parent, you have to give them a grade. You have to tell them this, but keep that towards the end. And everything during that project, don't grade, please. Right? So your project, beautiful, authenticity, aesthetically nice looking, should not be graded. It is the process that should be graded and not that. Let's not make and look forward to the beautification of the particular project. So keep the difference. Make your PBL as the main course of your dinner or your lunch and not the dessert for it. Through that, the last but not the least, constant regular feedback to your students. And finally, constant reflections. Your students should be reflecting and you should be reflecting. And that is what will make your project-based learning really authentic and fruitful. And that is going to be something which your children will never forget. And they will wait for your lesson at least to come in, and they're going to wait for that teacher to come in because they build bonds with you. So that is about project-based learning. So do we have any questions? So I think some of, okay, there is one question which said that feedback from. So your feedbacks can be from anyone. I mean, teacher, of course, you as a teacher, because you are going to be facilitating, give them constant feedback. Students can do a peer assessment and keep giving feedback that, hey, you missed out this particular point. Why don't you do that? That should also happen. In fact, students tend to learn the best from their own peer group. They take the feedback best from their own peer group and not from the teacher. Somebody's mentioned that they had a PBL presentation where students made the projects using recycled material. So the point is, because you haven't mentioned, I'm just assuming that this was not a dessert that you did. It wasn't something that children already learned about the recycled material. They already learned about the waste material, and finally they just did the presentation. Because if they did that, then it is a dessert that you have given them and not the main course. So I hope it was through that.
I think amazing, ma'am. This is so relevant that, you have spoken about the dessert and the main course, because most of the parents these days, they're only, not these days, but this is a, tradition going on since beginning, that parents are only concerned about the marks and the result. And even we as a teacher at times, focus on the results and marks point. So it is important that, how the process is happening and what is the, outcome of the process, how much is the retention. I think all these pointers are very important. What the child is getting through it. I mean, it was an amazing session, ma'am. Lovely. We have spoken about very sensitive thing, I think, and we all should keep in mind as a teacher. So thank you so much, ma'am. That was a lovely session. Do we have any more questions?
Tina's raised her hand. Tina, would you like to type it out? Can you see Tina's question, or do you want to just mute her?
I think no.
You can't see her?
Ma'am, you can type your question.
Just type out your question.
Sure, she must be typing.
So somebody's written, what are the different body systems in the human body and what are their functions? I would again say that though connected to real world, but it doesn't really help that particular child. If you talk about, how are our body systems interdependent and how our habits affect our health, that will make it more PBL, right? Because this will again have right and wrong. You know what you are saying. They will learn body systems. They will learn, okay, you have digestive, circulatory, skeletal, you have all of this. This is how they function, and that's it. Which they don't need to do a project. They can easily read it out. And if today's chat GPT, they can type it out and they'll get the right answer. But if they try and find out as to how our habits can have an effect on them and how our, lifestyle actually will have an effect on all these body systems, automatically the functioning and their connection will start coming in. So that is what is most important that you need to do.
Her question is how PBL is similar or different to design thinking cycle.
Okay, so basically, if you see, the steps all remain the same. So when you talk about design thinking, you talk about the 5E model, you talk about the inquiry model. Basically, they all talk about starting with the same thing. They talk from the fact that you pick up a question, you have questions, you find out the answers, you sort it out, and you end up presenting them. The only difference that comes in PBL is that PBL, besides the fact of making it relevant to the real world, it must solve a certain problem. So in design thinking, what we end up doing is the first step that we have where we empathize, where the first step comes in, it's the same thing as what we create as an essential question. And then we don't really in PBL need to go through that complete cycle of design thinking. You can skip a lot of parts in that and just come to the answer and product that you have. So these are all similar aspects. You just need to see where are you bringing out what. That's it. There is no other difference that you can come across. That's why, like what I said was, the inquiry model is also exactly the same thing. It is just the inquiry need not begin with an essential question like what you have now. And it may not end with a product. Inquiry could just end with another question. Any other question that you can see? I think, Shani, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. I think those who have questions regarding e-certificates, you'll get that on your registered email ID. In case you haven't received it for the previous sessions, you can reach out to your school coordinators, and they can get in connect with the SCHAN representative, so that in case you must have registered and not received the e-certificates, we'll get that done from our end. And for those who have already registered, they'll get that on their registered email ID for today's session.
I think there's one question, if I can just pick that up. I think Chanda's got that question. What is the difference between doing project and hands-on activities? So I'm presuming that when you're talking about doing projects, you are talking about the dessert and not really the project-based learning. So when you're doing a project, it is always a showcase project that comes in the end of the learning that comes in. Hands-on activity is basically an activity through which learning is happening. It may or may not be something which the child has his own, I would say, inquiry into it or his own initiative into it. The teacher designs that particular activity and says, okay, fine. It is something like, if I say for very little children, the moment you have a sensory walk, you will put some stones and you will put some cotton and you will put some other stuff. That means you've designed it. The outcome of that is the same. So that is activities. Whereas project-based is that everyone, you've just given an essential question to them. Everyone can come up with a different display or the experience that they are doing, the way they do it. Whereas an activity, the whole class does that activity together. The same thing. Everyone goes through the same thing. So this is what is the difference. That's why we are slightly moving away from these hands-on and these activities. These terminologies are now being changed, actually. That is why we are not using these terminologies now anymore. There is a website for PBL, which is called PBL. I think it's beautiful. Please go through it. I have a lot of my references that I've taken from the project-based learning. It is PBL Works, the website. Please go through that.
You'll get your feedback forms on your registered email ID. All right. So I think, ma'am, we can end this now.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. It was an honor having you here. And tomorrow, let us connect again and talk in depth about, our next session and next topic. Thank you. Thank you once again, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.